Welcome, and thank you for joining our 6th episode of Resilient Matters. Alison Burgess and myself, we're thrilled today to be joined by Mel Bligh, who's from Thrive Leadership Talent Development, who specialises in leadership, but who also champions menopause awareness in the workplace and the impact that has on women and businesses. So welcome, Mel. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you.
Pleasure.
And tell us a bit about yourself, Mel.
Well, I'm based in East Yorkshire. I've been in leadership development for 25 years. That ages me somewhat. And yeah, I've been in leadership in organisations, but also freelance. I've had my own company since 2004. And yeah, I'm really passionate about making great leaders, because at the end of the day, if we can have great leaders, we have great organisations. But what we do at Thrive now is we bring together leadership and well-being. So for me, any programs we run for leaders, we're always looking at what's the well-being element of it. Because at the end of the day, if we don't have really good, solid well-being within our organisations, it's going to be really hard to perform well. So we really try and bring together things like resilience into our programs. And we do a lot of work in menopause awareness for leaders as well. I guess I'm really passionate about building empathy in leaders so that they can support their colleagues, because at the end of the day, one leader is not a team. You know, we need our colleagues to all be well and effective. So that's for me why it's important. But yeah, that's a bit about me.
Yeah, and you know, interestingly, talking about, you know, working with leaders, you know, how do you think leaders can help, you know, their people and their organisation to build that resilience, do you think?
I think leaders are phenomenally important. Ultimately, leaders are role models, and everybody sees what a leader does. So if anybody out there is a leader, people are watching you, right? Because you are there as a role model, and how you behave, people take notice of. So what I would say is, if a leader themselves doesn't feel resilient for whatever reason, generally people can see that. And I think it's important for leaders to take responsibility for their own resilience first, to make sure that they feel mentally strong, to make sure they've, you know, invested in their own well-being. I mean, there's lots of different elements of resilience, but I do think it's a bit like the oxygen mask analogy.
Yeah.
If the leader, I mean, if the leader themselves is not resilient, how on earth can they encourage their teams to be resilient? So, I mean, I work with a lot of people as well, and we talk about work-life balance, because it's just one of those subjects that's always there in busy environments. And, you know, if you've got a leader who's working 60, 70 hours a week, everybody sees that, and it sort of sets a bar or an expectation that's not really healthy for everybody else. And even if that leader says, I don't expect you to do this, I'm just doing it myself, nobody believes that, right?
Yeah.
Because the behavior is much more potent than the words. So I think leaders are critically important to resilience. I think first of all, they need to understand what we mean by that. You know, we talk about bounce back, but I think it's about getting yourself into a state where you're strong on an ongoing basis, so that you can weather anything that comes at you. And let's be honest, organisations expect a lot from people now. Probably too much at times, and so I think it's important that the leader understands their own level of resilience and what they're good at in terms of that and what they're not. I think everybody's got a wonky stool with resilience. We can look after certain components and neglect others. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah.
Oh, so many things in there. I mean, as you talked about that difference between bounce back and that mental strength, I think that's very much where, you know, Kathy and I will be talking about that a lot when we work with people on resilience, because yes, there is okay, this is how I pick myself up, but in the changing environment that we work in now, with so much happening and at such speed, we need to be able to look at what's coming next and go, that's fine, I can do it, I've got this. That's why we came up with the name, I have got this. And that's a mental strength there of going, it's okay, I don't know what's going to happen, but whatever it is, I know that I'm able to do that. And I think, leaders as role models for that, but also creating an environment where individuals can be like that and can develop their own strength. It's such an important thing.
And I think that's where frameworks are quite important for, like mental strength, or I know there's different terms, mental toughness and stuff, but I think some of it's about, educating those leaders so they've got their own self-awareness, because actually as humans, we don't sit around. I mean, we probably sit around thinking about our self-awareness much more than, our clients, because that's what we do for a living. We help other people build their awareness. But actually, most people don't sit down and think, how am I resilient? We don't really have enough time to take that reflection. But I do find that different individuals have different strengths when it comes to resilience. But we've all got a little bit of a chink in our armor that we've got to be aware of. And some of that's linked to our personality as well. So I think there's a huge relationship between personality and resilience. And some of us, if depending upon your personality type, it might mean you put different pressures on yourself or on others. So I do think there's quite a lot of layers to building up.
Yeah, and I think some of it is life experience. If you've had your fingers burned before, you might be holding on to a script that says, oh no, this is dangerous, this is frightening, where it might not happen to another person, So I think you're right. I think everyone's so different when it comes to resilience. And like you say, without that self-awareness and really reflecting, what is it that makes me wobble? Is it a certain situation? Is it how others see me? And like you say, or personality type, if you're an innate people pleaser, that will make you wobble, and how much change we've experienced through our lives as well.
Oh, the amount of change that we're experiencing now is phenomenal, isn't it? And if you look at the speed of change over the last 20, 30 years, it's just ramped up and ramped up every year. And we all saw that so clearly during COVID, because we all had to relearn to do things overnight almost. And that I saw that put quite a lot of stress on clients who were having to work in this totally virtual world to start with. I think we've sort of morphed back to a hybrid situation. But that did definitely put stress, didn't it, on people? And the fact that we were in an odd situation made our resilience even more challenged, I think.
And you talked about leaders needing to be role models, and all of a sudden, those leaders who understood that and they were being role models, they were sort of out in the real world, as it were, able to do that. And then suddenly we're in a virtual world, or they're working with hybrid teams, and it's more of a challenge for them to be those role models, isn't it? Because they're trying to make the technology work for themselves, and they've got their kids running around in the background and all those challenges. And for some, I think it allowed them to be more vulnerable and to sort of show their full selves. But, for others, I think almost like the shutters came down and they had backgrounds which didn't show anything, there were corporate backgrounds. And, that whole role model piece started to break down a bit, I think.
Yeah, and I personally believe that humanisation that we got during COVID, where we did see people's cats walk across the screens or people's kids come in. I mean, I've done this to my kids. Don't come in. During the live training event. That's what's happened. We're living in a different world. And I personally think that humanisation of our workplace has been really valuable, because I think it helps us build empathy and we feel a bit closer together. In terms of actually, as humans, we're not that different. That's a big thing for me at Thrive. I actually think if we can create human programs and human interactions with people, your organizations are going to be better. If we have a nice veneer that's not real, that doesn't help us be better. And we know the high performing teams, everybody has a bad day. Everybody has a bad day, however senior that person is, or however good they are at their technical nature of their job. Everybody has a bad day. And I actually think if we can appreciate that and be a bit more vulnerable, then actually would really help us build resilience. Let's have the honest conversations. I'm all for the honest conversations with whatever I'm doing with clients and leaders, because let's keep it real. Let's keep it human, because we're all humans at the end of the day.
And you've brought up a really interesting point there, and I thought it when you were talking about, you know, being a role model and being resilient. That doesn't necessarily saying, hey, look at me, I am strong. It can be, yeah, this is tough, you know, and I think that's quite hard for leaders to show that vulnerability, you know, but actually that human side.
I think that says a lot about somebody's identity. So if we start digging under that human, you know, what's their values? What do they believe about themselves? What do they believe about others? What do they believe about leaders? You know, because that will impact how they behave, all of that stuff. And actually, that can challenge somebody's beliefs. The fact that you're asking me to be a bit more vulnerable or a bit more open. I think some people will find that pretty challenging to deal with.
And the different leadership styles, I guess, as well, you know, for somebody, maybe that control element of when you do have all your team around you and you don't have that and you're relying on more relationship building, that's quite tough for, you know, certain leadership styles.
But I think that's something we've all got to learn to achieve through relationships. You know, I think, again, through our virtual experience, the relationships become even more important. And one of the things I've seen from working with leaders is some leaders have really invested in those relationships, even though they're virtual. And some have withdrawn from them because they think, well, I don't really need to do that. Somebody's just getting on with the task. But as we know, if we just focus on the task, we're not really going to get high-performing teams. We're not going to get great results. We're not going to get employee engagement because people feel cut adrift and cut off. I'm sure you've got quite a lot of people during lockdown who felt cut off. You know, I just feel like I've been given this huge workload and I've not been given any sort of investment in me as a person.
Yes, and you hear the stories both ways, don't you? Because I remember there was one organisation that we spoke to and they were saying, actually what we did first of all is we drew a list of all the individuals who lived on their own, and we made sure that they got a phone call every week. You know, one absolutely wonderful that you know, on top of the standard calls that were happening, everybody who lived on their own got an extra phone call just to make sure that they were okay. But then I've also heard stories of people who've been, you know, started new jobs and just left to it, and you know, finding their own way, not feeling part of a team or anything, and you know, that's where the leader can make such a difference, recognizing what support you need. But we're back into empathy again, aren't we? Just understanding what we need as human beings in any situation and in the different situation that we found ourselves in.
Yeah, and I do think at the end of the day, leaders are humans, and humans they also have needs. So I think it was a very complicated situation. I know a couple of the clients I work with, their workloads went up phenomenally during lockdown. So what happened is people got their heads down and got through the workload, but that's had negative impacts down the track because actually people haven't had the emotional investment they needed to keep feeling part of the team or feeling valued or whatever, which is why we're seeing quite a lot of people leave organizations right now, I guess, because they feel a bit disconnected. And, you know, like you said about somebody getting a call once a week, that'll work for some colleagues and not for others. You know, we have to understand our people fundamentally. And a key part of a leader's role is understanding the people who work for them and know what makes them tick. What are those, to Kathy's point, what are those things that will make them wobble? And how do we need to shore up that individual to make sure that they're in a strong place? And if you ignore that, I think you do it at your own peril, really, because it will go back at some point. If you ignore it for yourself, but also if you ignore it for your colleagues, I think it will have issues down the track. I don't look at this negatively. For me, I think we've all been challenged over the last couple of years a great deal working virtually. And I think there's been some really positive outcomes, and we've learned to do things we didn't think we could do. But we have to make sure that people are still with us You know, as leaders, are they all still behind me, or have I lost them emotionally?
Yeah. I think one of the things about the, you know, as you say, the time that we've spent, and we have learnt a lot, is also taking that time to reflect and go, oh yeah, you know, look what I have taught myself, what I have, you know, what I have been able to do, how I have adapted. Because when we think about resilience, and then particularly going into mental strength, it's that opportunity to think, I came through it, came out the other side, more skills than I used to have, more confidence in myself than I used to have, and whatever happens next, because quite frankly, I'm not going to try and predict anything, but whatever it is, I now know I'm more capable than I was 2 years ago.
Yes, yeah. So you can gain some confidence through that lived experience, right? Even though it might have been a bit ropey and a bit tough at the time. I think, you can definitely gain confidence through it.
Yeah, and I think the manager has a role to play in that as well, to actually show them, you know, some of the great stuff they've done, the great stuff they've learned. Because I think it's very easy, particularly if you're working from home on your own, to be a bit tough on yourself and the things that maybe you haven't quite done. Actually, sometimes you need your manager to lift you, going, oh my gosh, you know, look where we've come, guys. You know, we've gone through all this change, and look, you know, we've actually grown through it.
But I think you're right, Kathy, because one of the things you've sort of touched on there is the support network, right? One of the key legs of any resilient organisation is people having good support networks. So, and actually, if people are at home isolated, working without a huge amount of connectivity with people, they do feel isolated, and then they do feel they make their own narrative up around themselves, what's going on. And so I think support networks are massively important. They always have been for resilient. Resilient people have got very good support networks for different things. But I think it's even more important in a virtual world that we encourage people to build connections in the way that's right for them, you know. I remember once, a few years ago now, I was doing a one-to-one coaching session with a leader in a public sector organisation. And she was a very, very bright individual, high potential. But when we were going through the feedback, she ended up crying because she said her support network was virtually non-existent. So she felt very isolated on her own. She didn't have a good relationship with her manager. She didn't really have a good relationship with her colleagues. And she that was what was her chink in her armor, you know, the fact that she'd not invested in that for whatever reason. But
and I think what gives longevity, I know we've done a piece of research just after lockdown, you know, on mindset, and you know, when we looked at what some of these companies have put in place, they didn't have longevity, so they'd find something would work for a while, whether it's like, oh come on, we're going to do weekly quizzes, or oh we're going to have whatever Cake Fridays, or you know, but longevity, if you've got a support network, that strengthens with time. It doesn't fold. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's got to be meaningful, you know, that connection. I don't know. I used to be in HR many, many years ago, and people say, let's go bowling. And I'd go, no, let's not go bowling. So it's got to be, I think people have got to feel a real connection to their colleagues. They've got to feel like we're all in this together. That's why things like having a real common purpose is really important to resilience. Are we all on the same team? Are we all driving towards the same stuff? Do I know what I do is important to the team? You know, even if I'm doing a really small task, I know why it's important to that bigger picture. So I think you do build that stuff over time, but you've got to do stuff that's meaningful to people and they want to be a part of, right? You've got to create organizations, you've got to create teams where people want to really be a part of it, and it adds something, it's meaningful to them, right? We're getting quite deep, aren't we? But you know, I do think the big
Do you know, oddly enough, I was putting together a blog last week on purpose, and you know why purpose is so important to us. And actually, just reminded me, Kathy, I haven't published it yet. You know, and it's exactly that thing that we see it from so many different angles. You see, like millennials are looking for that, you know, that stronger sense of corporate social responsibility and purpose in the organisations they work in. We've seen the Great Resignation, where people are going, no, it needs to mean something to me if I'm going to continue doing this. You know, we've seen the value of purpose at so many different levels, because it does. It not only helps you pick yourself up, but it pushes you, motivates you, and moves you forward. So it's an incredibly strong and powerful thing to have.
Well, at the end of the day, we all want to know, why am I here? You know, what am I going to leave? Why is it important what I do? You know, we all ask those questions in our subconscious regularly, right? And if we can't see what the purpose is, generally that's when we start to disconnect, right?
Yeah.
And then it's a huge impact to resilience. I think as well, linked to that is people being clear on the goals. Do you know where you're going, as well as where the organisation's going? Where do you fit in? Where do you click into that? And, you know, what goals have you got? Because I do think it's important for individuals to be self-driven when it comes to resilience, as well as organisations. We can look to our organisations like baby birds, can't we? Feed me, make me resilient. And I think organisations have an obligation to create structures that encourage resilience. But then I think individuals have to say, I have to own my resilience as well. You know, which is, I mean, I'm a massive passionate person when it comes to fitness and well-being and looking after yourselves. I think that's another leg of the stool for me, is how do we stay well and look after our well-being? How do we talk to ourselves and check in with ourselves? Am I giving myself what I need mentally and physically?
And how do you do that, Mel? You know, when you have to draw on your resilience, you know, we've talked a bit about yourself there, you know, what do you do to be resilient?
A few things, actually. I mean, I think one of the lessons I've learned over time is the importance of self-talk and my own mindset. So I think mindset's massive for resilience. We know, and you guys know, right, through what you do, that having an optimistic mindset and thinking about what is possible is really important for resilience. If I think about all the stuff that's wrong, or that there's a deficit, or the things I can't do, that's what's programming the way I think. So for me, I mean, I'm a big gym person. I'm a trained personal trainer. Not that I do that on a day-to-day basis, but I know the importance of fitness in link to mental state. And I was talking to a lady yesterday at the gym who was a couple of years older than me, but she talked herself into being very old, right? Because that's how she viewed herself. So I do think we have to sort of work on our mindset, and we have to work on what we can do and what we do want and what we do think what is possible. I've seen this a lot through the menopause work as well. You know, you've got very senior leaders who are in their maybe early 50s who are extremely powerful and extremely impressive people, and without them the organization wouldn't be running as well. And at times they've questioned who they are and their mindset, but when they've worked on that and when they've actually had a chat to themselves, which is says, no, I am able, I can do this, I do offer a lot of value, it does have an enormous amount of impact on what they deliver, but also their ongoing resilience. You know, but that does take some work. You know, how we talk to ourselves is hugely important. If I talk to myself in a negative way, you know what? It's going to impact my self-esteem, but it's also going to impact my level of resilience. Yeah. So I just tell myself I'm a machine, right? I can do this. You know? I'm probably on one end of a spectrum, which is a bit crazy. But
and that's why you're a personal trainer, I'm sure. You can do this.
You can do this. Yeah. Lift more weight. Yeah. You don't want to talk to me about that stuff. But I do think we have a huge amount of I think we have to own that. I do. It's actually if we tell ourselves a certain narrative that's not very positive, over time we start to believe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's recognising that, because actually that self-talk or that chatterbox, we might not notice we're doing it. And I've seen in coaching where I've heard people say things about themselves, and I think you would never say that to somebody else and go, "Oi, Mel." You know, it's okay to say it to yourself. And you know, quite often, whether it's through coaching or even just journaling, just recognising it, because like you say, especially in our busy worlds, and you know, it's really hard to take a step back going, right, I've just recognised I'm telling myself this and it might not be true. Now, how do we create that space for that reflection and self-awareness?
Good question. I think you've got to want to create it. That's where programs are handy, right? I mean, I don't think development programs are the beginning and the end of anybody's learning, but it gives them the initial window to do that reflection. And you often find those people who don't like reflection because they're busy people who want to get stuff done. They're the ones who need it most, right? And I do think that's why, you know, programs like the sort of programs we run give people the space to actually do some of that self-reflection and build that awareness. And then people will choose to do what they want with it at the end of the day. We are not there to make people learn a certain lesson or to build awareness in a certain way. It'll be personal to them.
And as you said earlier, it's that idea that we use this language and we think about it and are very conscious of it all the time. But actually, for a lot of leaders in organizations, they don't have that space until you give them that opportunity, and they don't have the language to really start to look at themselves. But once they do, then you've given them a tool for life. You've given them something they can really work on to build their own self-awareness and to pick up on that self-talk and to be their own champion rather than pulling themselves down. But you have to give them that opportunity to see that and to understand the impact of the mind, because it can so powerfully work for you or against you.
Yeah. It's like influence, right? We can influence positively or negatively. We choose that. And it's not just for others, but for ourselves, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that on our website, now I'll just mention this, a bit of a plug, but we do have a self-assessment, because you know, our model, we've got the 6 cognitive habits, just so people can take that time and to think about the questions that are in there, so they can mark themselves and say, actually, I am quite bold and courageous, but I don't value and care for myself as much as I could, or you know, be more motivated to understand what motivates me. Like you say, it's that self-awareness and that space to do that.
That sounds like a good place to start, though, Kathy. I mean, at the end of the day, I think we've all got a wonky leg on the stool, all of us. Or we've all got a thing that we, every now and again, we might take our eye off it. And that's when we start to feel less resilient. So I think it's good to, even if you're somebody who's looked at resilience before, you go back and look at that tool. That's a good tool to look at, right? To start off and think about, you know, what have I got all this covered, or are there areas that are weaker than others?
Yeah, totally. And it's but it's I just can't believe the time. We could talk so much, and you know, and admiration for all that you do. And I've got some great topics that have come up here. We could have spoken a long time, you know, on all of them. But you know, I particularly like the fact that, you know, it is up to individuals. It's not just a leadership role, but leaders do have that important role to play in that. And you know, and that empathy and understanding. So I thought you brought some great insights to hopefully, and it helps people on this call. So really appreciate your time, Mel.
Pleasure. We'll do part 2 at a later date.
We will, but any one of those things that you raised. But, you know, thank you so much. It's been fascinating. And we'll be continuing to host these weekly calls with the hope to help people in our networks, and we'll be talking to people across a variety of industries and functions. But if any of our network would like to be involved and be on one of our LinkedIn Lives on a Wednesday, that would be amazing. We have mentioned the our website, which is www.ihavegotthis.co.uk, which I'll just bring up on screen, where you can have a look at the self-assessment, and obviously other great tools in there. And we've also got 101 ways to build our mental strength on the website too. So hopefully there might be something for everybody on there. But great to speak to you both and catch up, and look forward to speaking to you soon, Mel.
Thanks, Mel.
Thanks so much for having me. Take care.
See you later.